After making our second record, I stepped back and I looked at the situation, and I felt I needed to do something different. So I started working on this album. And I was just maybe putting it off, having to make a decision. And I think as humans we don't like to make decisions a lot of times. You just let things fade naturally. Mm-hmm. And that was the case with Elefant. Well, I was working on this new record called Laura and creating this new sound for what I imagined would be a career I could do for the next 40 years. I did flirt with the idea of putting Elefant back together for a third record. We had all this material lying around. And we pretty much made that third record. But I had to decide which one I was going to put my heart into. When it came time to do the solo record, I approached him to see how it would work in the studio, and we spent 3 hours, and I was convinced he was my perfect match, and for so many reasons. Sensibility-wise, we just completely connected. His parents from Costa Rica. He grew up in Miami. We had a lot of friends from our childhood in common. My parents are from Argentina, so he understood where I was coming from, and after a year or so experimenting with things, we really honed in on the sound, which is Laura, which is obviously sort of a modern take on the love romantic balladeer from the early 70s that came out.
It was a rainy night in a quiet town in Florida.
Live is a completely different animal. What works live does not necessarily work in a studio, and vice versa. I think live is about playing to the room and to that moment in time. And whether it's yelling or whispering, it depends on the sound or the crowd, if they're attentive or not. The acoustics in the room, that goes all into it. So I love it. I find it very. I love playing acoustically like that. All the songs, come from an acoustic guitar, so it's not a stretch. As an artist, I think it's your responsibility. It should be your goal to create art that is an extension of who you are as a person, and we're all like snowflakes, and you got to figure out what makes you you. And I think having parents from Argentina is a big part of my DNA, and I wanted to address this on this album. So I look back to my favorite time, which was the late 60s, early 70s for music, and I unearthed all these singers that I'd listened to growing up, but I just had completely ignored because it was coming from my parents' record collection. I think as a kid you immediately don't. They're beautiful. And I say that very sincerely, not like I'm bragging. I always felt with Elefant I was pushing something. With this, it's very effortless because there was so many people actually involved in making these songs. I think so special, from George to Danny. It was the first time I'd co-written with people. The irony is that it was a solo record, but I'd let all these people in because I needed to make it better. I needed to improve, and I saw areas that I could grow and better myself.
A flash in the sky.
Wouldn't it be really good if we recorded at your house in Henley? Friar Park Studios, where the Traveling Wilburys recorded. And he loved the idea. So, I forget which summer it was, when I flew to, with the guitarist at the time, Matthew Quitter. We flew to London and went to Henley, which is outside of London, to George's castle, Friar Park Studios, and we stayed for 10 days. It was magical, it was surreal.